Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, your host, and we're back. It's 2022. Who can believe it? We even made it through 2021. And we're talking again about sustainability and how we're going to reduce our personal environmental footprints. If we're going to reduce society's greenhouse gas emissions to zero over the next 20 years, the future of packaging must embrace recyclable and compostable alternatives to single-use plastic. Made from oil, the plastic we use in the majority of today's packaging produces environmental damage at every step in its production. And our guest today, Wouter van Tol, who is the head of sustainability at packaging maker DS Smith, is working with a new seaweed-based material to deliver alternatives to today's unrecyclable food packaging. The London-based company's North American unit recently announced an aggressive initiative to adopt seaweed-derived fiber across its entire product line. And we're going to explore how that project is going, along with the range of packaging it may be able to replace. You can learn more about DS Smith at www.dssmith, that's all one word, dssmith.com. Welcome to the show, Wouter. How are you today?
Hi, Mitch. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. And I want to start off with an observation I saw from DS Smith about the holiday impact of e-commerce. You all did an analysis and you found that British shoppers using e-commerce services are going to come out of the holiday with a lot more cardboard in their home than they can possibly recycle. And I just want to start with a question because everybody wonders this. Why is cardboard still so difficult to recycle?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because actually cardboard is not difficult to recycle.
Right.
It is the most widely recycled packaging material. And the question is really, why can't we recycle more? And why do we have so much left over in the home, especially in the festive season? So especially if you're talking about the UK, you need to have a look at how the material is actually collected. Right. And it seems that every local authority has its own scheme and its own number of bins that you can put things in. And in some cases, is actually commingled. And that means put all your waste in one bin, essentially. Now, if you have a lot of cardboard in your house and you have one bin to put it in, often you'll find out it's just not, it doesn't fit. So then you have leftover. You need to go to your municipal recycling center and it takes more time. And so the cardboard just piles up in your house. Now we need that. That's a valuable resource. We need that cardboard to make new paper out of. So we are very, very keen that this commingling doesn't happen, that cardboard and paper are collected separately. So that it's nice and clean, dry, uncontaminated, valuable resource goes straight into our paper mill that makes new paper out of it and new packaging. In fact, we can do a cycle from the moment that we pick up the paper to making new paper out of it and then packaging. And at the end of the life of the packaging, we pick it up again and recycle it again. It's a 14-day cycle. 14-day box to box, we call it. So, we are ready to use that paper, but we need to get our hands on it.
Well, now you call out the problem that we have universally, which is recycling is not organized in any national or even statewide in the United States or smaller regions in the EU. In any other way than just sort of single stream or some esoteric combination of bins that are not similar. So that if I go talk to my neighbors 2 miles down the road, they have a different recycling process and it accepts different materials than I have. Mm-hmm. Simplifying the recycling process is critical to this. Do we need to do this by reducing the complexity of the packaging itself, amongst other things, or is it simply a matter of investing in more infrastructure so that we have the ability to capture all that material?
So I think it's a combination of things. Okay. One is we should be able to simplify the materials. So you'll see in plastics that a lot of plastics manufacturers are moving towards single polymer family packaging. And that makes it, in theory, more recyclable. In practice, plastics recycling is still in its infancy and it's actually also very energy intensive. So don't get me started on that one. I think in a lot of cases, plastic can be replaced by natural materials that are easy to recycle, like cardboard and paper. So there's certainly some steps that we can take there. But also, I think we need to have a look at in which countries, in which places in the world does the recycling work really well. There are high recycling rates, and where people are really used to a certain system that just seems to work well. In our opinion, and it's the opinion not just of DS Smith, but of a cross value chain initiative called Forever Green in Europe, they analyzed a whole number of different countries in Europe and said which of these systems is the best, because you'll have some cardboard, you'll have some laminated paper, like milk cartons and things like that. You have metal, you have glass, all these things. What is the best system? And in our opinion, it's Germany probably that has the best system.
Now, I've read a lot of research on why people recycle or do not, and it usually comes down to the fact that it's convenient to recycle more than one material with one trip or one effort, whether that's sorting at your home or going to the drop station. As you think about how to help DS Smith customers with the packaging you produce, do you need to build the instructions right into the packaging itself so that there is some way for people to take a step at the end of the use of the product or the packaging?
Yeah, the problem is that it's so diverse. So what sort of instructions do you give? Because depending on where the packaging ends up, you might have completely different systems. So it's almost impossible to just print some standard instructions on how to recycle.
Well, and that has, of course, become a sort of default thing to do, is say this is recyclable, but only in theory, because of your local regulations. So again, it comes back to, it sounds like just we need to rethink our infrastructure entirely.
Quite, yeah, exactly. And in Europe and in the United Kingdom, there is a move, and I know that in some United States there's some similar movements towards extended producer responsibility. Right. So if you put some packaging on the market, you need to pay a fee, and that fee is there to make sure that the packaging is then at the end of its life recycled and in the correct way.
Yeah, and I think those EPR programs are going to be critical. There are 2 states with that here now, and in fact, I live in Washington State, where we will soon have that as well. In fact,
right.
First, I think we might. But so, we're talking a lot about the infrastructure. Let me turn to what we got together to discuss, which is the seaweed-based fibers that you are beginning to work on. Are they more easily recycled, or do they face the same complexities that we just talked about in terms of the one location will not understand what to do with it and another one will?
Well, we need to research that. And that's why we've invested in research capability to understand the recyclability of these fibers. And also, how energy efficient are they? How water efficient are they? What are the barrier properties? In which cases can they replace plastic, for example, as a barrier coating? And in which cases can they not do that? And then when you recycle, how much residue is there? And there's so many questions that essentially we just said, okay, seaweed is a very exciting material with a lot of potential. We know wood fiber much better. We've been using that for decades and decades. But let's use seaweed as a test case and see what kind of things we can do with that. We also look at some other types of fiber, because in the end, any natural fiber could be used essentially to make paper. But I think seaweed, especially because of the potential barrier properties, is exciting.
So it's more moisture resistant, and can it do that without becoming a composite material like the laminated cardboard cartons that we were talking about a few minutes ago?
Yes, exactly. So, for example, there was a marathon in England. I think it was last year, where Lucozade, the sports drink, was disseminated among the competitors in little sachets of seaweed, and they look exactly like plastic, but they contain the liquid, and essentially you can just pop it in your mouth, and it's just as easy as that. Now that makes me think that okay, there is some sort of barrier property there, but in which cases can we really use it? So, for example, if the liquid is acidic, how does that work? If it's a refrigerated value chain, how does that work? How long can it resist moisture? Can it resist fat? And those sorts of things. So we need to know much more before we can really say what are the best ways to use seaweed. But it's an exciting material, that's for sure.
Well, and you announced this in August as an initiative. So you're getting into it, and it sounds like you're beginning to assess some of the initial data. What kinds of packaging are you thinking that seaweed fiber-based materials can replace? Are we talking about meat cartons? Are we talking about? Can you give us a few ideas about what we might be looking at in 2 or 5 years?
Yeah, so one of the types of packaging that I really don't like is that black plastic, those black plastic food trays for ready meals, for example.
Can't be recycled for the most part.
Can't be recycled. And now we can make the tray out of wood fiber, but you still need some sort of moisture barrier and fat barrier. And just from a food safety point of view, that's required. But and so we're thinking, can we do something with seaweed there? Or that's just one example.
So, is making seaweed-based fiber more energy or emissions efficient than making wood fiber products? Is there a difference that you can make at the production stage in terms of environmental impact, in addition to the fact that we could recycle this more easily?
Yeah, so we need to find that out, and because of course we're used to a very different type of fiber, and we need to find out over the life cycle of a product what is more water efficient, which is more energy efficient. So Mitch, we're at the early stages of understanding seaweed, because it's almost like you've been investing for decades in, like, for example, the oil industry. It had to start somewhere, and they're now the whole chain from drilling to all the way to the pump where you get your gas is a very efficient process now, and so the cost of oil is actually very low. And then you come with a renewable energy alternative, and that needs to compete against that really efficient value chain. Well, it's similar if you look at wood fiber. Wood fiber is a brilliant material. It's renewable, it's recyclable, and just what we need to know is, okay, this young contender that's just shown up, seaweed, what can we do with that? And it takes a little while to catch up and find out which use cases are the best.
And as you look at the viability of the material, do you also consider the fact that we're looking at seaweed as a food source and a variety of other things? So is there going to be contention over places where we can farm seaweed? And is that going to raise the price of the material, making it potentially less competitive with oil?
Yeah, so we're using a type of seaweed that's farmed, so it's not wild, and there are different types. It's fast growing, and because the oceans are so big, theoretically, you would say it doesn't really compete with land, and therefore it's actually better than a lot of land-based alternatives. Now, you need to see how that works in practice, because you don't want to be competing with food sources. Of course, seaweed is also a great place for biodiversity, so farming seaweed could potentially be a very beneficial thing. But again, when you're at the beginning of this innovation, you need to find all these things out. So, but we certainly don't want to compete with food uses. That would be the wrong thing to do. Right
at this time. Now, so DS Smith has what you call a now and next sustainability strategy. So you're not going to just make one big leap into the future. You've got a series of steps. Where are you in terms of the progress on that sustainability program across the entire organization, not just with regard to seaweed? We see that you're aiming to get 100% reusable or recyclable materials in your packaging by 2030. How far along are you in that process now? What percentage of your products are reusable or recyclable?
Well, so from top of my mind, I can give you the scoop. We're at 99.44%, I believe, and that sounds great. But that last 0.5% is really, really hard. You're talking about the most difficult cases, and how can we get? And still, a lot of turnover is based in those materials, and you can just walk away from that, and you can just say, well, it's too difficult. Well, we don't want to do that. We really want to come up with some innovations. And in the United States as well, we're doing some tests at the moment for new materials, which are very exciting and provide some barrier properties, for example, for cardboard that's used in refrigerated or wet circumstances. So we are trying to innovate our way out of that last 0.5%. But tell you what, there's some tough challenges in there.
One of the things I noticed is there's a real emphasis on recyclability, but what about compostability? Can we maybe solve that last 0.5% by giving up on recapturing that material, but making it potentially a feedstock for composting and gardening at home? Could people just take up that last 0.5% at home?
It sounds good, doesn't it? Composting.
Yeah.
It sounds like the solution to all our problems. Composting is great if the material is actually composted.
Right.
Because if it's not, if it just ends up in the normal waste stream and it ends up in landfill or something, actually the methane emissions are you don't want that. It's worse. So that means that composting, generally speaking, compostable packaging is best used in situations where you have good control over the waste. That you capture all the waste and it goes to a specific composting facility. Then it's a brilliant solution. So if you think of a festival, a music festival, that's brilliant because everybody uses those, fast food type packaging. Okay, you can capture that and you can send it off to a place to get it composted. But if it's just somebody going to their coffee chain, walking down the street with their compostable coffee cup and then throwing it in a bin on the street, it is virtually for certain that is not going to get composted, and then it's worse for the environment overall.
Well, and that ultimately comes back to such as the extended producer responsibility laws we were talking about. We have to have an incentive system that somebody will clean this up. And the interesting thing is I look across the global examples that we have considered. There's two kinds of countries in terms of success. One is one where there's a strong social mores about keeping things clean, reusing things, being a recycling enthusiast. And countries in Europe are certainly represented of that, especially in Northern Europe. The other are countries where they have what can only be described as a trash picking class. But those countries, like China and Brazil, for instance, have incredibly high recovery rates because people are so poor they can eke out a living picking trash up. We need a fairer system, obviously, but is there some kind of are there hints in that spectrum between social mores and trash picking that we can think about activating to get that cup out of the landfill or keep it out of the landfill?
Yeah, I think for the social mora, it's really important that people see the result of their efforts. Because, of course, it's great that you put the effort in, but you don't want to then find out that your plastic waste is shipped to some developing country where it ends up on a beach. Right. So you want to know that you're doing the right. If you invest in doing the right thing and you put all that effort in, you want to know that there's the right outcome.
So could we use Internet of Things kinds of technology, QR codes, or other kinds of contactless tracking systems to say this item is back and
yes,
and your 14-day loop?
And we're investing in some of that technology to actually know where all our waste is. Well, it's not our waste, but it is our packaging that we want to pick up, because for us, there is no waste. The packaging at the end of its life is our raw material for the next cycle of packaging. So for us, it's important that we track where our natural resources are that we can pick it up in the most efficient way and maximize the recycling rate. So that's the best for our raw materials. So we want to really know where does that go. But you can imagine that's pretty tough, because this packaging goes through all kinds of steps, through retailers, through delivery vans, and then people's houses. And it might get wet, it might get pulped at some point, and you still need to have some kind of sensor that tells you where it all is, so that you learn how these where all the raw materials are. Now that's a challenge.
And you're also, that's one of the things that we're working on at Earth911, linking where we know things can be recycled to things in some way. So, love to continue that conversation off the air. Let's talk about a couple of the other goals and where you are. You have a goal of getting to 40% reductions in your historic emissions, CO2 emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. What's your progress to date on that?
Well, it's actually... we said at least 40%, and I can tell you that we've just submitted our data for a science-based target. So we are hoping to, as soon as the Science-Based Targets Initiative has time, we hope to get a verification of our targets, and then you'll see that it's well above 40%. That we're going for, and that's for a timeline of 2030, and then we have a 2050. Net zero target, so net zero emissions. Now that's pretty tough because we use natural gas at the moment, so we need to go in steps from natural gas to better alternatives. And well, I can talk about that for a while, but we're certainly making good progress. So we made progress from 2015 to 2019 of 23% reduction of CO2 per ton of product. That's how we calculated it then. We're now going to go to an absolute emissions reduction trajectory. So it will be even tougher because we're a growing company. And so if you want to reduce your emissions, your absolute emissions, while you're growing, it's a tough challenge.
Well, and in fact, we are coming out of a couple of years, and hopefully coming out. I shouldn't count any of those chickens until the pandemic actually ends. But where so much more packaging has been being delivered to the home, did your absolute emissions rise as a result of the dramatic increase in e-commerce and other kinds of home packaging use over the past couple of years?
We haven't specifically tracked it down to e-commerce, although there's no doubt that e-commerce grew very fast. Other sectors reduced, in particular in the beginning of the pandemic. So automotive, for example, you won't be surprised to know that suddenly reduced. Our absolute emissions did increase a bit, not much. And I'm sure that e-commerce was part of that equation, but it's not the whole story.
A lot of things changed. Now, another thing, you just mentioned that you use natural gas. Is the fact that natural gas prices are spiking by 400% in some cases. And in fact, as we are speaking, there are riots going on around the world, specifically around the cost of natural gas. Yes. Is that an incentive that can drive the entire industry towards alternatives to natural gas and the embrace of renewables?
Well, for sure, because and also if you follow the EU carbon price, that has gone from about whatever it was, 40 euros per ton of CO2 not so long ago, maybe a year, 6 months ago, and now it's more like 70 or 80 euros per ton. Wow, then suddenly your payout ratios for investment in renewable energy look a bit different. So you're getting much closer to that break-even point. So yes, it's certainly relevant.
History certainly looks like it's on our side. The question is whether or not we choose to get on the right side of history. Now, you have a really interesting element of the plan that relates to that. You want to engage 100% of your workforce just in thinking about enacting their circular economy role by 2025. And you want to get 5 million young people to adopt circular lifestyles, which means you have to enable those circular lifestyles by 2030. How are you going to do that? We talked about incentive programs and marketing programs earlier. What drives 5 million people to embrace your approach to circular economy?
So I think you have to make it interesting. So if in social media is certainly one of the ways that we're trying to do this, because you can just reach people very efficiently and frequently, because just a one-off course, like a traditional course to learn about circular economy is great. And by the way, we've developed those. And
by the way, we have too.
Fantastic. And we roll that out to all our employees, step by step. And that really works. And gradually people are getting their head around what circular economy means. And that's all good. But I think social media is really important. And we've also developed a lesson plan so that teachers, and we're going to soon translate that into 11 other languages other than English, so that teachers all over the world have a basic lesson where they can explain in an engaging, fun way what circular economy actually is all about. So we're also tracking how many people use that, how many teachers and how many children they want to educate with that. So it is a combination of those different types of media. But I think the reality is that social media is one of the best ways to reach young people, and that's what we're trying to do.
Now, are you also going to be using labeling? And we touched on this a little bit earlier, in order to help people identify first, like the seaweed alternative that they may have in their hand, and also to help them figure out how to participate in the circular economy for that package. What kind of experimentation are you doing, and what are you learning from it?
Well, there are some countries where marking is mandatory, and you might have a QR code. And if you then follow the QR code, it tells you, how to recycle, what the packaging is made of, and where to recycle it. The downside is there is so little commonality in those systems that we just cannot say that there is one marking system that we can apply all over the place. So it is just it's a complex one.
Well, and one of the things that you could do with that kind of QR code label you just described is have a fallback. If you're in a place where you can't do this, we have this option. Are you looking at mail-in programs or other things that could help people who are in poor recycling regions, for lack of a better way of describing it, get that material back to you?
That's not currently how we're doing it. What we're doing is because we think we cannot do it alone. Mm-hmm. I think the challenge is just too big for one company to do by itself. So that's why an initiative like Forever Green in Europe is really helpful, because then as a total industry, right, for retailers, recyclers, paper manufacturers, chemical, ink providers, the whole value chain coming together and saying, okay, we know the recycling rate needs to go up. We know that. Now, what steps can we take through the design, through the collection, through innovation, to make sure that we capture as much of these materials as possible, close these loops, and even in those places that you describe, collect it. And that is a massive challenge, but I think it requires cross-industry collaboration. Well,
and the thing is, these efforts are beginning in earnest all over the place. Now we have to hook them together, and it's inspiring to hear you acknowledge that so frankly. Now, obviously, seaweed-based products are out there in the future a bit. Do you have any sense of when consumers might be seeing these kinds of packagings in retail?
I'm sure that we are not the only ones who are looking at applications of seaweed. So I'm
thinking about your products.
Yeah, I think I don't have anything that I could tell you right now. And even if I did, it would probably be commercially sensitive, so I might not be able to tell you for that reason. But we're very much in this research stage because we don't want to get this wrong. You want to make sure that you get seaweed right for the right applications, and that you don't have unintended negative consequences. So I think it's worth the bit of time to figure out how we can do this.
Well, our listeners are certainly going to follow along on that. How do you suggest they do that?
Well, I think certainly if they are on social media, whether it is Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that, I would. Well, DS Smith is one of the ones that you can follow.
DS Smith. Okay. Do you have any hashtags other than that?
No, just follow. Just follow DS Smith on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, and then you'll just be the first to know as soon as we're ready to communicate about this. You'll be the first to know. And I would just say, yeah, well, I'm sure that there will be other applications in other industries, but I think for that, it is best to follow some of the producers, some of the biotech companies whose sole purpose is seaweed. Because, of course, for DS Smith, this is like an exciting new venture, but our main business is paper-based, sort of wood fiber-based fibers, and this is an exciting new addition to that. But I think those biotech companies are also interesting ones to follow.
It's great advice, and thank you for sharing the story, because this is an important beginning, and it's great to see you taking those steps. Wouter, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today.
It's my pleasure, Mitch. My pleasure.
We've been talking with Wouter van Tol, who is the head of sustainability at the packaging company DS Smith. Check it out at dssmith.com. That's dssmith, all one word, .com. And follow them on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. It's important that we keep track of the opportunities to change our personal habits that'll lower our impact on the environment. And while it's very early days for things like seaweed-based materials, this is the beginning of a green economy that we're all watching take root. Whether or not it all blossoms is up to us, and whether or not we participate in and help it along. So folks, take the time and keep up on what's going on out there. This is Earth911 Sustainability in Your Ear. We will be back again this year with new interviews several times a week, and we're looking forward to expanding our offerings and services even more. If you would take a few minutes to share this podcast and others from us, as well as any that you think are informative with your friends or family, your people on the street, let's get people thinking together about a solution to getting out of the climate crisis. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. We'll be back soon. Have a green day.